the new Final Destination movie coming out, I thought it would be a fun idea to make a video kind of summarizing all the rules associated with death's design in the movies, kind of comparing them, seeing if there's any inconsistencies, so that we can kind of contextualize them before this newest movie and refresh a little bit. I recently rewatched all 5 of the original Final Destination movies, and some of my information about what especially they're doing with Bloodlines could be a little bit off. I've avoided the marketing for the most part because I don't want to get spoiled. I don't want to see some of the deaths. I kind of just want to let the movie play out, see for myself how things work out and how death comes to everybody in that movie. But I do know the basic plot line, and we're going to get into that. So kind of the first rule that they establish in this world of Final Destination is the vision that people get, the premonition that eventually saves all these people's lives in the initial sense. In the first movie, it's of course with Alex when he experiences the premonition of the plane crashing, blowing up, and then he and all of his friends manage to get off in time because of that. His premonition saved their lives, and then they end up living when they weren't supposed to be. They evade death's design, which is initially a mistake according to Death. They weren't supposed to get off that plane, and because they did, they changed things, they changed the rules, and they changed their place in Death. And because Death doesn't like to be cheated, that is when he or it comes after all of them one by one. And this kind of gets into the second rule, the order. Something that they especially establish in that first movie is the idea that the place in which that they were supposed to die, the seats where they're engulfed in flames, pretty much assuming that everyone dies kind of depending on when the flame hits them first, they die in the order that they were supposed to die in the premonition. This is something that runs throughout the whole franchise, goes from each to the next. When they have their initial premonition, you can basically count on the idea that death is going to come for each person one by one in the order in which they were supposed to die in real life before things were changed by the person who got the premonition, moving them off of whatever catastrophe they were initially supposed to face. Obviously, in the first one, it's with the plane. In the second one, it's with the highway pileup. Third one, the roller coaster. The fourth one, the raceway. And then with the fifth one, the bridge collapse that kills everybody involved. At least until Sam got everybody off the bus and moved them to safety. Throughout the first movie, this is kind of where they get into the way in which they can attempt to cheat death in the first place. Throughout these movies, something that you see is them trying to find methods of cheating death, ways of evading it, if nothing else, temporarily. And something that they find out in the first movie is that if one of Death's main attempts to kill them fails, then it skips them, at least for the time being, and continues moving in the order in which that Death was going to kill them. So if the second person were to quickly or very closely evade the death that they were supposed to have after the fact, Death skips them for the time being and then moves back in order once he comes back around. This can be subject to change, like with how Clear kept herself basically completely hidden, away from anything that could harm her, so Death eventually goes for Alex. But I think that's because of an absence of opportunity, and Death's not going to completely halt its design just because someone becomes so reclusive that they're not around anything dangerous. They eventually find out, though, that evading the death doesn't just make them get skipped forever, that Death does come back around, so that isn't a permanent solution to this, although it works in the temporary sense. If you have a big group of people especially that you evaded death with, Death will burn through the other people first before coming back around to you, and you will eventually get your turn back. And then in the second movie, they establish this idea of new life tilting the balance and thwarting death. Now, we actually haven't seen this example proven in this franchise or proven further in the franchise, because in this movie, the premise of it is that if this baby is born that they initially thought was supposed to die in this crash with its mother, that Death would have to leave them all alone because new life completely challenged that notion and challenged the design in a way that tips the scales and balances them. So they assumed that they could probably get away with it if they ensure the birth of this baby. Only to find out that after the baby's born, they think that Death is not coming for them, that it's all over, that that baby was going to be born anyway, that that mother wasn't part of the crash. So although Bloodworth, Tony Todd's character, says that this is what could happen, new life could balance the scales and create this situation where the people who were supposed to die in that situation don't because of that challenge, it's proven to be meaningless because that baby was going to be born anyway. And with that, that kind of makes it a little bit more up in the air about whether it actually works, whether Death will leave you alone after that. But because Bloodworth said it, I consider it canon. At the very least, it seems like he's seen enough of these situations, he can be believed, and he's been right about pretty much everything else. It seems like Death finds loopholes though, because Death doesn't like to be cheated anyway. Even if you find these loopholes or cheats to it, it seems like even if it's not today or tomorrow, Death will come back eventually. And then then this is when we get into the new rule that the third movie established. This is probably very much one of the lighter additions as far as continuity or canon or the rules to death. They introduced this idea of pictures showing omens, relevant ways in which that the characters are going to die, like the kind of burnt smudge for the girls that get cooked alive. They show kind of awkwardly pictures of 9/11 where the shadow of the plane is on the buildings. It was a little bit in poor taste to do like 3 years after it happened, but I didn't make the movie. But that basic idea that you can kind of see these signs, ways that happen, like with the creepy guy, with what happens to, his head in his car, gets into that accident where the top of his head is basically sliced off. They show relevant presentations that can kind of warn people, and you can kind of figure out a little bit of how the person potentially dies based on the pictures and the omens associated with that. And this is even a little bit further taken to a much more awkward degree in the fourth movie, where I think his name is Nick, the main character, is having visions that also present these omens, but they're, CGI images of the tools or the things that will probably kill the person. I kind of put those in the same camp. I see them as basically the same thing, except one of them's showing them in pictures, one of them is the character getting them in visions. That's really the fourth movie's only contribution to the franchise, is having the omens in the form of visions of CGI objects, but that's still something that needs to be considered as part of this basket of omens that warn of death. And then on to the last one, and what I would say is probably the most significant contribution to this franchise, and it's the idea of if you kill someone while you're on death's list, they take your place in death, you take their place in life, and you live their remaining years. Now, it's a little bit vague. You could ask a lot of questions about it, like, is it only the next person you kill? If you kill several people, I assume that it's just if you're on death's list, the person that you kill, you take their place in life, they take your place in death, and you can't just go around killing people and bank up hundreds of years of life by killing other people. I assume it's just kind of a 1B. You see that with, when Grover kills Roy, pushes him, and then only to find out a couple days later that Roy had a blood vessel that was going to pop any day, so he dies anyway. But I assume the fact that the other main characters also die, I don't know if then they get additional life. It's just another one of those rules where, since it hasn't exactly worked out for any of the characters in this universe, it's hard to say how actually effective it is, or if just by death's design, death doesn't like to be cheated, so even if you temporarily moved some things around, did some things to evade it, eventually you will get caught. I'm not sure if the implication is that the plane crashed because of Sam. I didn't really take it as that. I took it as he kind of just happened to be there and death was kind of cleaning up loose ends. Either that or he's just so misfortunate and unlucky. I mean, that would suck. But overall, the idea that making someone take your place in death and making you able to take their life, that's probably the biggest amendment, I would say, to the franchise since its inception. Probably the most significant rule, probably the biggest game changer, and I wonder how they're going to address it in Bloodlines. Now, kind of getting into Bloodlines, this is where things get very convoluted, and again, I kind of have to preface this as I don't exactly know. I need to see how the movie portrays these things and does it, because I think execution could matter a lot, the way that they explain things. I'll fully just acknowledge I only saw the first teaser trailer and avoided the rest of the marketing, so I don't know what kind of rules they're going for. I'm not sure how they're going to explain it, but in this movie, this group of people evaded death, and then they had all these kids that were never supposed to be born because they were supposed to die, and then death is sweeping up these loose ends of all of these bloodlines that were never supposed to be because they were supposed to die. Now, what my question with that one is why death took so long to come back around to those people, but I would have to assume it's maybe because the ancestors maybe took people's lives, made other people take their place in death, and they took their place in life, and then went on to have all these kids that would also be on death's list because they were never supposed to be born. So even if they were given back that life, these kids should have never existed to begin with, so that's why death is unhappy with what's going on and trying to set the balance of nature back to normal. It kind of contradicts number 2 if that rule of new life contradicts or thwarts death, the idea that death goes away once a baby is born that isn't supposed to be born. But I don't know if they're going to reconcile that in some way or acknowledge it, because they kind of have to, unless they just want to sweep Final Destination 2 under the rug, but it's their most popular movie probably, so I'm not sure if I would do that. But I guess we'll see how it all works out. As far as I know, those are all the rules associated with Death's design, kind of explaining Death's design in terms of this franchise. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments section. I'd love to hear. Did I miss anything? Let me know. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.